I first heard about Elisa Lam during my stint as an investigative journalist covering unsolved mysteries. The case was infamous for its eerie details: a young woman found dead in a water tank atop the notorious Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Her inexplicable behavior, captured in elevator surveillance footage, sparked wild theories, from mental illness to paranormal activity. I couldn't resist diving into the story, hoping to uncover the truth behind her tragic demise. I arrived in Los Angeles on a foggy Tuesday morning, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. The Cecil Hotel loomed before me, its faded grandeur and sordid history casting a shadow over the bustling city. The hotel lobby was a relic of a bygone era, with tarnished chandeliers and worn-out carpets. As I checked in, I noticed a chill in the air that seemed to seep into my bones. The receptionist handed me my key with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're in room 412, she said. "Try not to wander too far." Her warning was unsettling, but I shrugged it off. I was here for a story, and nothing would deter me. As I rode the creaky elevator to my floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The air was thick with tension, and the dimly lit corridors seemed to stretch on forever. I made my way to my room, the sound of my footsteps echoing ominously. Room 412 was as nondescript as any other, with its bland decor and stale air. But something about it felt off. The room was cold despite the heat outside, and the shadows seemed to dance along the walls. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or something more sinister at play. After unpacking, I decided to start my investigation by revisiting the infamous elevator footage of Elisa Lam. Sitting on the edge of the bed with my laptop open, I played the video, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. The footage showed Elisa entering the elevator, pressing multiple buttons, and then hiding in the corner as if she were being pursued. Her movements were erratic, and her expressions shifted from fear to confusion. It was chilling to watch, knowing that this was one of her last moments alive. As I replayed the video, trying to decipher any clues, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I heard a faint whisper behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but the room was empty. I laughed nervously, chalking it up to paranoia. But as I turned back to the screen, the video froze on an image of Elisa staring directly at the camera, her eyes wide with terror. My laptop screen flickered, and for a split second, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. The room plunged into darkness, and I jumped as the lights flickered back on. I was alone again, but the sense of unease lingered. Something wasn't right. Determined to shake off the jitters, I headed to the hotel bar to gather information. The bartender, a grizzled old man with a knowing look, greeted me with a nod. "You're here about Elisa Lam, aren't you?" he asked, pouring me a drink. I nodded, surprised by his perceptiveness. "What do you know about her?" He leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "This place has a dark history. People check in and never check out. Elisa wasn't the first, and she won't be the last." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "What do you mean?" He glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. "They say this hotel is cursed. Ghosts of the past linger, and they're not friendly." I was skeptical, but the fear in his eyes was genuine. "Do you believe it?" He shrugged, polishing a glass with a rag. "I've seen things I can't explain. Doors opening on their own, voices in the night, shadows that move when they shouldn't. If you want to know the truth, be careful where you tread." His warning echoed in my mind as I returned to my room, my curiosity now mixed with trepidation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and the shadows seemed to grow darker. As night fell, I settled into bed, the weight of the hotel's history pressing down on me. Just as I was about to drift off, a loud bang jolted me awake. The sound was coming from the floor above, like something heavy being dragged across the ceiling. Heart pounding, I crept out of bed and opened the door, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The sound grew louder, and I felt drawn to it, unable to resist the pull of the mystery. I ascended the stairs to the rooftop, each step echoing like a countdown. The door to the roof was ajar, creaking ominously as I pushed it open. The night air was cold, and the city lights twinkled below like distant stars. The water tanks loomed ahead, their hulking silhouettes casting long shadows. I approached cautiously, my breath visible in the chilly air. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the rooftop, staring out over the city. It was a woman, her hair fluttering in the breeze. My heart skipped a beat as I realized she was wearing the same clothes Elisa Lam had worn in the elevator footage. I called out, my voice trembling, but she didn't respond. As I drew closer, she turned to face me, her eyes hollow and haunted. The sight was more than I could bear, and I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. But when I looked again, she was gone, vanished into thin air. A chill ran through me as I realized I was alone on the rooftop, or so I thought. I heard a whisper in the wind, a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You're next." My blood ran cold, and I backed away, the shadows closing in around me. Something was terribly wrong at the Cecil Hotel, and I was in the middle of it. As I fled the rooftop, the hotel seemed to come alive, the walls closing in and the air growing thick with malevolence. The mystery of Elisa Lam was deeper and darker than I had imagined, and I was only beginning to scratch the surface. I barely slept that night. Every creak and groan of the hotel seemed amplified in the darkness, and my mind raced with questions about the apparition I'd seen on the rooftop. By morning, I was exhausted but more determined than ever to uncover the truth about Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel. I headed down to the lobby, eager to gather more information. The receptionist from the previous day was absent, replaced by a young woman with a bright smile that didn't match the hotel's eerie atmosphere. "Good morning," she chirped. "How was your night?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Uneventful," I lied, forcing a smile. "I'm doing some research on the history of the hotel. Do you know anyone who might have more information?" She considered for a moment before nodding. "You should talk to Marcus, our night janitor. He's been here for years and knows every nook and cranny of this place." I thanked her and made a mental note to find Marcus later. For now, I needed to explore the hotel's history more deeply. The bartender's words from the previous night echoed in my mind, and I decided to visit the local library to delve into the hotel's sordid past. The library was a quiet refuge from the chaos of my thoughts. I pored over old newspaper clippings and historical records, piecing together the hotel's grim legacy. Over the decades, the Cecil Hotel had been home to countless deaths, suicides, and murders. Each tragedy seemed to weave into a tapestry of darkness that shrouded the building. As I read about the infamous residents, from serial killers to tragic victims, a pattern emerged. The hotel had a way of drawing people in, ensnaring them in its web of despair. The stories were chilling, but none more so than Elisa Lam's. Her disappearance and death felt like the culmination of the hotel's malevolent influence. My research was interrupted by the sudden realization that I had been at the library for hours. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. I gathered my notes and headed back to the Cecil, determined to speak with Marcus before the night fell completely. As I entered the hotel, the air felt different, thicker, more oppressive. The lobby was nearly empty, save for a few guests who seemed as uneasy as I felt. I made my way to the janitor's closet, hoping to find Marcus before his shift ended. The hallway was dimly lit, and the silence was unsettling. I knocked on the door marked janitor, my heart pounding in my chest. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged man with a weary face and piercing eyes. "You must be Marcus," I said, trying to sound confident. He nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "What do you want?" "I'm looking into the disappearance of Elisa Lam. I heard you might have some insights about the hotel." Marcus studied me for a moment before stepping aside to let me in. The small room was cluttered with cleaning supplies and tools, but it felt strangely comforting, a sanctuary from the hotel's ominous aura. "Elisa's case," he began, his voice low and gravelly, "was one of the strangest I've seen. But she's not the only one who met a mysterious end here." I nodded, eager for him to continue. "I've read about the other deaths. What do you think is happening here?" He leaned against the wall, his expression grave. "This place is cursed, no doubt about it. But it's more than that. Something here feeds on fear and despair. It wants people to suffer." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you believe it's supernatural?" Marcus shrugged, a haunted look in his eyes. "I've seen things I can't explain. Doors slamming shut on their own, lights flickering, voices in empty rooms. It's as if the hotel itself is alive. I recalled the shadowy figure I'd seen on the rooftop and felt a chill run through me. Have you ever seen anything? Or anyone unusual on the roof? He hesitated, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. There's a reason we avoid the roof. Many who've gone up there never come back the same. It's like the hotel's trying to claim them. My skin crawled at his words, but I pressed on. Do you think Elisa might have been trying to escape something? Marcus nodded slowly. She seemed troubled, like she was running from something. But whatever it was, it found her. Our conversation was interrupted by a loud crash from the hallway. We both jumped, the sound echoing through the hotel like a warning. I should go, I said, feeling the urgency of the moment. Thank you for your time, Marcus. He nodded, his expression somber. Be careful. This place doesn't like outsiders poking around. I left the janitor's closet with a sense of foreboding, the shadows in the hallway seeming to stretch and reach for me. As I made my way back to my room, the oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on my shoulders. That night, I decided to explore the hotel's upper floors, hoping to find more clues about Elisa's disappearance. The elevator ride was tense, the air inside thick with anticipation. The upper floors were even more unsettling than the rest of the hotel. The carpet was frayed, the wallpaper peeling, and the dim lighting cast long shadows that danced along the walls. As I walked, I heard faint whispers, like voices carried on the wind. I stopped in front of room 514, rumored to be one of the most haunted in the hotel. The door was slightly ajar, and an inexplicable urge pulled me inside. The room was cold and empty, but the air was charged with an unsettling energy. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers trembling as they found the knob. The light flickered on, revealing a room untouched by time, as if frozen in the past. A figure stood in the corner, its back turned to me. My heart leapt into my throat as the figure slowly turned around. It was Elisa, or rather, a ghostly version of her, her eyes vacant and hollow. She reached out toward me, her voice a whisper carried on the wind. Help me. Before I could respond, the lights flickered again, and she vanished, leaving me alone in the room. My mind raced, the encounter leaving me shaken to my core. As I stumbled out of the room, I knew I was in over my head. The mystery of Elisa Lam was deeper and more dangerous than I had imagined, and I was only beginning to uncover its secrets. The next morning, I awoke from a restless sleep, my mind plagued by haunting images and half-formed theories about the true nature of the Cecil Hotel. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, I knew I had to keep pushing forward despite my fear. I needed to understand what Elisa had been running from and why the hotel seemed to have a life of its own. I sat at a small table in my room, the diary I'd found in the basement open in front of me. Elisa's entries were disjointed, filled with fear and desperation, but they also contained clues, fragments of a story that begged to be understood. As I read, I noticed recurring themes. Elisa often mentioned feeling watched and spoke of nightmares where shadowy figures followed her through endless hallways. She described the hotel as if it were a living entity, a place that thrived on the despair of its guests. Elisa wrote about the basement, about how she felt drawn there despite her fear. She mentioned hearing whispers and footsteps in the night and seeing things that shouldn't be there, figures that melted into the walls when she tried to confront them. But it was the final entry that sent a chill down my spine. I'm trapped. The hotel knows my secrets, and it won't let me go. I can feel it inside my mind, twisting my thoughts. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. If you find this, please, don't let it take you too. Her words resonated with me, and I felt a deep sense of connection to her struggle. I realized that I was facing the same malevolent force that had driven her to despair, and I had to find a way to stop it. Determined to uncover more, I decided to explore the hotel archives, hoping to find records or blueprints that might reveal more about its history. I knew that many of the secrets lay hidden in the past, and I needed to piece together the events that had led to its dark reputation. The hotel's archives were stored in a dusty, forgotten room on the second floor. The space was cramped and cluttered with old newspapers, blueprints, and files dating back to the hotel's construction. As I sifted through the piles of paper, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. I discovered that the Cecil Hotel was built in the 1920s, a time when Los Angeles was booming. It was intended as a luxurious destination for travelers, but the Great Depression had quickly changed its fortunes. Over the years, the hotel had become a refuge for the downtrodden and desperate, a place where hope came to die. The more I read, the more I realized that the hotel had a long history of tragedy. There were reports of suicides, murders, and disappearances, each story more chilling than the last. The building seemed to attract darkness, as if it were a magnet for suffering. As I continued my research, I stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping about a man named Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. He was a notorious serial killer who had stayed at the hotel during his murder spree in the 1980s. The thought of such a sinister figure roaming the halls made my skin crawl. But it wasn't just Ramirez. There were stories of other killers, other lost souls drawn to the hotel's malevolent energy. It was as if the building itself called out to them, whispering promises of darkness and despair. I was beginning to understand that the Cecil Hotel was more than a backdrop for tragedy, it was an active participant. The events that had taken place within its walls were not mere coincidence, they were part of a pattern, a web of malevolence that ensnared anyone who dared to enter. With my head full of grim revelations, I decided to take a break and get some fresh air. I stepped out of the archives and wandered down to the lobby, hoping to clear my mind. The lobby was bustling with guests, their chatter echoing off the marble floors. I tried to blend in, but I felt an odd sense of detachment, as if I were watching the world from behind a pane of glass. As I stood there, I noticed a woman staring intently at me from across the room. She was older, with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested she had seen more than most. Curiosity piqued, I approached her. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "You're the one looking into Elisa's case, aren't you?" I nodded, surprised by her insight. "Yes. How did you know?" She chuckled softly. "This place has eyes and ears, dear. You're not the first to come searching for answers." I was intrigued. "Do you know something about the hotel? About Elisa?" She hesitated, glancing around before leaning closer. "The hotel is a living thing. It feeds on the energy of those who stay here. Elisa. She wasn't the first to feel its pull, and she won't be the last." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I pressed on. "Do you think the hotel is responsible for what happened to her?" The woman sighed, her expression somber. "I think this place has a way of twisting people's minds. It knows your fears, your secrets. It uses them against you." Before I could ask more, she stood up, her eyes filled with a quiet resignation. "Be careful. The hotel doesn't like it when people get too close to the truth." With that, she walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. Her warning echoed in my mind as I returned to my room, the weight of the hotel's dark legacy pressing down on me. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the air growing colder as the hours ticked by. I lay in bed, listening to the creaks and groans of the building, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Just as I was about to drift off, a loud bang echoed from the hallway, followed by a series of frantic footsteps. My pulse quickened, and I grabbed my flashlight, ready to confront whatever was out there. I opened the door and stepped into the dimly lit corridor, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. The hallway was empty, but the air was charged with an unsettling energy. As I turned to head back to my room, I caught sight of a figure at the end of the hall, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to shimmer in the flickering light. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, but I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. It started moving toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I backed away, my heart racing as I realized the figure was getting closer. I turned and ran, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the corridor as I fled in terror. I made it back to my room, slamming the door behind me and fumbling with the lock. My hands shook as I braced myself against the door, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. The hotel was alive, its malevolence seeping into every corner, every shadow. I was trapped in a web of darkness and despair, and I was beginning to understand that there might be no way out. My heart pounded relentlessly in my chest as I sat on the floor of my room, back against the door, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The figure in the hallway haunted me, its presence was both terrifying and deeply unsettling. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. The hotel held secrets, and Elisa's diary had hinted at something more significant than just a haunted building. There was a dark force at work, a malevolence that was more than just ghosts and shadows. I needed to confront it, to understand what had led to Elisa's tragic fate and the countless other lives claimed by the Cecil. Determined, I gathered my courage and decided to return to the basement. The diary's clues and the archives suggested that the hotel's foundation, both physical and supernatural, was rooted there. I had to face whatever was lurking in the depths of the Cecil. The journey down the winding staircase felt longer this time, every creak and groan amplified in the oppressive silence. I felt a suffocating presence watching me, an unseen force urging me to turn back. But I pressed on, flashlight in hand, driven by a need to uncover the truth. The basement was as I remembered it, cold and shadowy, with a sinister energy that made my skin crawl. I walked toward the water tank room, the echoes of my footsteps seeming to bounce off the walls in mocking rhythm. Inside, the air was thick and stagnant, and the dim light cast eerie shadows over the cluttered space. I steeled myself, approaching the tank where Elisa's diary had been found. Something was drawing me there, a magnetic pull that defied logic. I circled the tank, my flashlight casting beams across its grimy surface. As I ran my fingers along the metal, I felt a strange warmth emanating from within, as if the tank itself was alive. I paused, listening intently for any signs of movement, and heard it again, a rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat echoing through the air. Desperation clawed at me as I searched for a way to understand this madness. I remembered the diary, Elisa's words about the hotel knowing her secrets. I realized that it was not just a building but a sentient entity, one that fed on the fear and suffering of its guests. It was both a place and a presence, a force that consumed those who fell into its grasp. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The hotel wasn't just haunted by spirits, it was alive, a being born of darkness and despair. The tragedies and horrors that had occurred here had given it power, transforming it into something more malevolent than I had imagined. But Elisa's diary had also offered a glimmer of hope. She had written about trying to fight back, about seeking a way to break the cycle of terror. I realized that if I could understand how the hotel worked, how it manipulated its victims, I might be able to stop it. I opened the diary again, flipping through the pages with a newfound urgency. Elisa had described moments of clarity, brief instances when she felt she could resist the hotel's influence. She had written about a place within the hotel, a forgotten room that she believed held the key to its power. The words were cryptic, but the description was clear enough, a hidden chamber somewhere beneath the hotel, a place where the darkness was most concentrated. I had to find it, confront the source of the malevolence, and destroy it if I could. Armed with this new knowledge, I began searching the basement for any hidden passages or clues that might lead me to the chamber. The shadows seemed to shift around me, whispering threats and promises of doom. I ignored them, focused on my task. Finally, after what felt like hours of searching, I discovered a small, concealed door hidden behind a stack of old crates. It was locked, but I found a rusty key hanging nearby, as if placed there for someone to find. My hands trembled as I turned the key, the door creaking open with a sound that echoed through the basement like a warning. Beyond the door lay a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. The air was colder here, the sense of foreboding almost palpable. I hesitated, fear gnawing at me, but I forced myself to step forward, descending into the unknown. The staircase led to a chamber deep beneath the hotel, its walls lined with strange symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The room was filled with an unnatural light, illuminating a central altar where something dark and twisted seemed to writhe and shift. As I approached the altar, I felt the malevolent presence intensify, a force that threatened to overwhelm me. It was as if the hotel itself was alive, its consciousness centered in this chamber, a dark heart that beat with the suffering of its victims. I realized then that this was the source of the hotel's power, the entity that had claimed Elisa and countless others. It was a being of pure darkness, a predator that fed on fear and despair, growing stronger with each life it consumed. But I also understood that it could be defeated. Elisa's words echoed in my mind, her belief that the cycle could be broken. I knew I had to try, to confront the darkness and end its reign of terror. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward, raising my flashlight like a weapon. The entity recoiled, its form shifting and writhing as if in pain. I focused on the symbols, the patterns etched into the walls, and realized they were meant to contain the darkness, to bind it to this place. I spoke the words that Elisa had written in her diary, a chant she had found in her search for answers. The air around me seemed to tremble, the entity thrashing and writhing as if trying to break free. But I held firm, repeating the chant, pouring my will into the words. The chamber shook, the walls seeming to close in as the entity fought against its bonds. And then, with a final, ear-piercing shriek, the darkness shattered, the entity imploding in a burst of light and energy. The room fell silent, the oppressive weight of the hotel's malevolence lifted at last. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, the realization slowly sinking in, I had done it. The hotel was free, its dark heart destroyed, its reign of terror ended. As I made my way back up the staircase, the atmosphere felt lighter, the shadows receding as if released from their chains. The hotel was still, its silence a testament to the battle that had just taken place. When I emerged into the basement, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent since I first arrived. The hotel, once a place of despair and darkness, was now quiet, its malevolent influence finally broken. I returned to my room, exhausted but triumphant, knowing that Elisa's spirit, and those of all the others, could finally rest. The mystery of the Cecil Hotel had been solved, its curse lifted, and the truth revealed. But as I packed my things, preparing to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered, a presence watching from the shadows. The hotel might be free, but its history was still written in blood and darkness, a testament to the horrors it had witnessed. As I walked out of the lobby for the last time, I glanced back at the building, its faded grandeur a reminder of the secrets it still held. The hotel was silent, but I knew that its story was far from over. Some mysteries, I realized, were meant to remain unsolved. And the Cecil Hotel, with its dark legacy and haunted halls, would always be one of them.